all profit is value extraction. And that means that all profit is theft from you.
Corporate America is on welfare, and we've got to get them off welfare.
The last words on my lips, I am a revolutionary, and you're going to have to keep on saying that.
Hi, all. This is Bryant. Welcome to Cars and Comrades. I'm here with Conner, just to do a little intro to the episode. This is a interview I recorded with my friend Rafi, who drives a train for the local mass transit authority here in Denver area. This interview was recorded, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago or something. And in that same time, there's been a lot of escalation of violence in Israel and Palestine. And we wanted to address that. It came up in the interview a little bit since Rafi was born in Israel. And I think, everything that he had to say was very good. And, I don't want to put words in his mouth or anything, but I didn't really say much myself. And I just wanted to be a little bit more explicit and express my solidarity with the Palestinian people who are living under military occupation and are facing a very one-sided violence from the IDF and other forces within Israel. So, maybe the listeners might disagree with me on that one way or the other, but I felt it needed saying. It's something that needs addressing, and we're not experts by any means. We're not real journalists. We're not, any sort of political analyst. But I think that we can see a one-sided conflict when we see it. Most of the deaths have been Palestinian as of late.
I'm with you. Again, we're not experts, but I feel like probably many of our listeners were fairly, engaged in the news of the day and the politics going on, and I think that's part of advocating for a better world is understanding the one you live in. And again, from my perspective as well, it's a pretty one-sided conflict. There are parts of this conflict that are complicated. And that really goes back to the original founding and this and that. And there was probably a better way that this all could have started, that probably could have avoided violence. But unfortunately, that isn't how they started. That, Israel was not created in a way that cared about the native people who were already living there. And, sure enough, it's come up to bite them in the ass over and over and over again. And it is sad to see just the absolute brutality they bring to the situation. And, I hear a lot of, but Hamas this, but Hamas that. Hamas is just the group of people who are their political representation, because, the Palestinians really do not have any political power. They get to govern their own areas that Israel decides what those are. And Israel decides, well, actually, here are the resources you get. Here's what's allowed. Here's what's not allowed. Here's how much electricity you get to use. Here's how much, here's how your homes will be divvied up. Oh, here's what happens if somebody wants your home. So naturally there comes to be a militant resistance to that. I mean, it's, even if you don't like some of the things that are done, what else? What are the other options? And unfortunately, no one for the last 50, 60, however many years, has been willing to come to the table and actually negotiate a real peace, an actual equitable way that people could live together. I think, as Rafi said in the interview that's going to be coming up, I don't want to give it away. I think kind of his solution was pretty seemingly reasonable. And from what I understand of the situation, I just feel that and I feel others who know the situation better than myself generally don't think much of a two-state solution anymore. There seems to be, a one-state solution could be something that could work, but unfortunately, if the IDF continues to brutalize people and kill children, I mean, what kind of peace can there be? So that, anyway, that's just kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of would have beens if things had gone differently. But we can't go back and change the past. We have to
Exactly.
work with what exists now.
And what exists
and
now, I think, is relatively clear and not that
yeah,
complicated anymore.
yeah. I think I do think that maybe a one state solution would be good, but really, like you said, the onus is on the Israeli government and the American government, really, that supports them to, at least honor a ceasefire. I believe that a lot of the Palestinian forces, including Hamas, have called for a ceasefire, but
It's been
the
turned down.
IDF has turned that down. Yeah.
Same with the U.S.
So
The U.S. has gone, which I don't understand everything at the UN, so I'm not an expert on that, but I know, when the U.S. wields its power to block a vote on a ceasefire, I mean, that's pretty clear. We know what they're doing.
yeah, and we know that the people are not, the government doesn't always represent the people. So the Palestinian people are not all Hamas. The Israeli people are not all IDF. There's plenty of people that just want to live peacefully and not hurt anyone else.
Although, actually, to jump in there, I don't know if
Yes.
you've, Bryant, seen the video of Abby Martin interviewing Israeli people who were, using very genocidal language, and not like, oh, they're religious extremists. It's unfortunately the culture within Israel, because of their far right government and whatever propaganda, they put, just like in the U.S. You know, people are very comfortable with saying, "Oh, we just need to kill all the Arabs." I mean, they're comfortable with going on camera and saying, "Yeah, I think we need to carpet bomb them." It's disturbing.
I mean, that is definitely a prevalent attitude. Yeah, I know there are
Yeah,
left wing voices in Israel calling for peace and for Palestinian rights. That is, I believe, a minority viewpoint,
it's. I feel
unfortunately.
like those folks who absolutely exist, and I can't imagine how they must feel in that environment. Very much where, can you imagine being the minority when everyone else is talking about genocide? And just like,
Yeah.
so that's also very unfortunate. And again, none of this has anything to do with the Jewish faith or anything like that. It's large, militaristic societies doing what large militaristic societies do.
Yeah, and most of the Jewish folks that I know in the U.S. are at the least critical of
Yeah.
Israel. And I think that uh, if anyone wants to call us, anti-Semitic for being critical of Israel, then go fuck yourself. Um, that's not a I don't understand how that argument works. That was how they were trying to smear Jeremy Corbyn a couple years ago, and even Bernie Sanders,
Yeah.
who himself is Jewish and lost family in the Holocaust. People were calling him anti-Semitic. I don't know that I'm getting a little emotional just thinking about that. Sorry. Yeah. So sorry. It's a tough subject, no matter who you are. I mean, this interview is mostly about public transit and 24 Hours of Lemons. So I don't think we should spend too much time talking about this, but this is, an issue that I felt we should address. I was telling Connor earlier, it's a bit like if I don't know, let's say if we recorded an episode like the day before JFK got shot and then didn't talk about it, and it went out the day after or something like that. So it's a big event, and I felt it needed addressing some way. So I don't know. I guess there's better sources, there's better coverage out there. I'm a big podcast listener, so that's how I get some of my news. And I know Citations Needed does a very good job of media coverage and media criticism. And their most recent episode, I believe, is about sort of the right wing talking points about Israel and Palestine. And so they do a good job of debunking a lot of those talking
Yeah,
points.
that episode is called News Brief. So it's one of their shorter episodes. It's called Debunking the 5 Most Common Anti-Palestinian Talking Points. So we definitely
Yeah.
recommend checking them out.
Yeah. And Abby Martin has also done a lot of good work covering Palestine. That documentary that you mentioned is free on YouTube right now. I believe is it called Palestine Fights for Freedom?
Gaza Fights for Freedom. It is also on, if any of our listeners happen to have Means TV, which is like the socialist Netflix. I know I watched it on there. Which let me double check, make sure it's still up. Yeah, uh, yeah, it's still it is still on Means TV if you have that, which also a very worthy service to consider getting. But that was not exactly a light documentary, we'll say. But anyone who maybe knows Abby Martin, who actually we use a lot of sound bites of Abby Martin in some of our intros and outros, you may have noticed. So if you come across her, she does do a lot of good work, especially on this topic. She's very good. And Brian, you said she was just on somebody's podcast, right?
Yeah, Pod Damn America, the podcast that Jake Flores hosts. And they're all comedians, so it's not the most serious podcast, if you couldn't tell by the name. But Abby Martin is a very serious journalist, and she does a good job of explaining it. So I would encourage you to check out that podcast if you haven't already. It's a good one.
Good, good. Yeah, that's I think maybe might be worth mentioning a few of the unfortunate statistics that are going on right now as of Sunday as well. Because right now, as of now, Benjamin Netanyahu is still telling the IDF to continue full force. Was the quote I saw. So he is telling them to continue what they're doing without slowing down. And what that so far has meant is at least 55 Israeli airstrikes have been carried out so far in Gaza. So we don't. I couldn't find a current listing of how many buildings and homes have been destroyed or damaged, but it is, more than 55. I believe it is actually in the hundreds at this point. So
Yeah, including the offices of I believe it was the AP, so the Associated Press. Had their office building destroyed by an airstrike.
they share that building with Al Jazeera. So that building was targeted. Many people suspect because that's where pretty much all the journalism for Gaza, for at least for international press, was carried out of that building. So many have pointed out that that appears to be a war crime, and it appears that they did give people they did warn them and give them a chance to evacuate, but a lot of equipment is lost and a lot of journalism will be delayed. So many have suggested that it could be because things are about to get really bad and we might not be able to see all of it.
Yeah, and I believe the IDF said that they were targeting Hamas people in that building, but
Yeah, what we've learned what we've learned is Hamas is everywhere. In
yeah,
every single home, Hamas is there. So wherever they want to hit.
if they gave them warning to evacuate the building, that kind of gives shows the lie there that why would they give Hamas warning before destroying their building? So
Yeah.
I don't know.
The old human shields myth is coming through too. That
Yeah.
it's like that's not how it works when you're indiscriminately bombing. So as of now, at least 192 Palestinians have been killed, and that includes 58 children and 34 women. So that is a really, really awful stat. Now, Israel, of course, has suffered some casualties as well. It's very one-sided, but Israel has so far reported 10 dead, including 2 children. So, of course, regular Israelis are also caught up in the violence. It's the Israeli government doesn't care about like their people too. It's this is typical. This is what governments do. So the other thing that I saw, which of course Israel is controlling access to electricity as well. That is an ongoing issue, and they can kind of cut off electricity whenever they want, which is not great for considering what's going on, especially with the number of people in hospitals in Gaza. We know of at least 1,200 people have been injured, including 300 children, and these injuries are severe. Getting hit with a bomb is bad. So when you have people in hospitals and they're cutting off the electricity, you kind of do the math there. That's obviously a problem. On top of that, we know of at least.
I was going to say we'll put a link in the show description for if you want to donate to medical aid for Palestinians.
Yes, yeah, please do. So please donate. They definitely need help. As of now, what I'm seeing here is that people in Palestine are calling for a general strike and a day of action for this coming Tuesday, which hopefully the episode will be up already, but Tuesday, May 18th. So they are calling for a general strike, which, I understand not everyone can just do. We don't have that kind of momentum. However, there are likely to be some places where people can do that. The other thing is, there's other ways to help. Of course, donating to organizations on the ground who are helping. There are people who will hopefully be. There will be protests at consulates or embassies, who local to your area. Hopefully, there's calls to make public commitments to Palestinian liberation and to support BDS. So BDS movement has been picking up steam very, very slowly over many, many years. But this most recent round of violence will likely, help the BDS movement gain a little bit more steam as the situation becomes a little bit more clear to a lot of new people. Even in the U.S., they were trying to literally make laws against anyone coming out in support of the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. So they have come out. Yeah, I think even the Democrats were trying to pass some kind of law that would. I forgot what they were doing, but they tried to do something like that. That's becoming more accepted
And that,
now.
I mean, that to me is blatantly unconstitutional. I would say that's against the First Amendment. And I know Abby Martin, who we mentioned earlier, is part of a class action lawsuit to overturn that law in Georgia, I believe.
Georgia, yep.
Yeah. But there's other states also. I believe there is a teacher in Texas who was, as part of her employment contract, had to sign some sort of loyalty pledge, which seems insane to me. But I mean, that's America for you, I guess.
Yeah.
So
So there are hopefully check your local area. There may be protests probably all this week, but Tuesday will be a big one. So if you're able to get out, do something. I know we're all we all got jobs. We're all busy. Life is hard for all of us. If it is something that there's something going on in your area and you are able to get out and show your support, I'm sure the people in Palestine would greatly appreciate every little bit.
yeah, definitely. I also wanted to say that we're recording this on the 16th, which is Romani Day of Remembrance, which marks the day in 1944 when I believe it was over 600 Romani people in the Auschwitz death camp rose up against the guards and were all killed because of it. So
Yeah, a lot of heavy history there.
so
The world
uh,
sucks, man.
yeah,
World sucks now. The world sucked then. The world sucked forever. And we're the ones called crazy for saying, "Hey, maybe we can have a better world.
yeah.
Maybe that's possible."
Well, I think the rest of this episode will be a little lighter and a little bit more optimistic. I mean, I think what we talked about with public transit and Amtrak and train infrastructure with Rafi is a little bit more hopeful. So hope you like it,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah. Maybe pause, go get yourself a cup of coffee or whatever your beverage of choice. Maybe take a minute and shake it off a little.
Yeah,
Because I know sometimes I need a minute before going from a very heavy topic to jokes and whatnot. So maybe take a break, maybe don't. I mean, it's your life, you do what you do. But yeah, the rest of the podcast will be on a much lighter note. And don't forget, if you're looking for more lighter note, you can follow us on social media at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, Hexspare. We're on pretty much all of them. So Cars and Comrades, and yeah, you can find us there. So we post funny memes and hopefully a little bit lighter than some of this.
yeah. Well said. And I'm sure if you have an opinion on this, you can email us or hit us up on social media. And if you don't suck and you're you're talking to us in good faith, we'll respond. And if you're calling us names, we'll I don't know, respond in kind. So yeah, I don't know. That's about all I have to say. Anything else?
Yep, I'm pretty much in agreement there. I think
Cool.
think we've said what we need to say.
All right. Hi, welcome to Cars and Comrades, your podcast for car content with a leftist perspective. My name is Bryant, and here with me is Rafi. How's it going, Rafi?
It's going well. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. Thanks for doing the interview here.
I'm happy to be here.
Rafi here is, well, I know him from 24 Hours of Lemons, but he drives a train for the local rapid transit authority, is into all kinds of interesting cars and vehicles. And I don't know, he's an overall interesting fellow. So I thought it'd be good to have him on the show and talk about a few of those things. Of course, all of his opinions are his own and not those of RTD or its affiliates. Just want to put that out there. But I think you're pretty free to speak about transit generally, right?
Yeah, generally it's perfectly fine. In fact, I love public transportation. I lived in New York City for three and a half years, and I didn't
Okay.
have a car, and I took the MTA, the Metro North, New Jersey Transit, even Amtrak, and I had a great time. If you live in a place that has a lot of good transit, you don't need a car. And I'm a huge proponent of public transit as just a way to get wherever you need to go.
Nice. Yeah. I think we talked a little bit about this a little bit when I was talking to Scott, and I think my view is that we should really have more public transit for people that just want to commute to work or go to the shops or whatever, and then save the cars and roads for the auto enthusiasts who want to hoon around and do donuts and street race and all that kind of fun stuff. But maybe that's just me.
It's definitely a utopia idea. In
Yeah.
a perfect society, massive transit could do the everyday stuff, and then we could leave the roads for the pleasure, for the fun, for
Yeah.
the extraordinary.
Yeah. Maybe not the city streets. We're not going to say people should be doing burnouts in downtown Denver, but
Well,
maybe out in the
I'm just gonna
country or in
I'm
the mountains
gonna
or whatever.
well, I'm gonna put like I know I like this idea. I'm gonna put like a Star Trek spin on it. Imagine if cities were really dense and
Yeah.
walkable around a central transportation hub. Like if you had that one hub and then everybody used the public transit to get to that hub and then just walked everywhere, there would be no need for real streets. You just have like access tubes or access areas, and then the roads would connect the cities that couldn't be used by these transportation hubs, and you could drive them because imagine if the place you needed to go had no roads. Why drive there? You just use the public transit.
Yeah, totally. And like, if I want to get to downtown Denver for a concert or for a protest or whatever, and I don't want to have to like park my car and pay for parking and stuff, I'll take public transit. It's a lot more convenient in that way. Maybe not. It might take a little longer. You might have to wait for the train or the bus or whatever. But I mean, it's a decent network here in Denver. It's maybe not as good as New York City, but for Western cities, it's a pretty decent system. A lot better than maybe, I don't know, Dallas or whatever.
In the last 25 years, it's gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
We've emphasized rapid transit to the core, which kind of leaves out the suburbs. So all the suburbs feed into the core of Denver, and that's helpful and that's hurtful. The helpful part is if you need to get to downtown Denver, boom, you've got public transit. The hurtful part is the people who can't afford a car and need to go suburb to suburb, they get left out of the equation. They are the ones stuck on the local city routes for hours and hours on end because that network isn't as well developed. But again, compared to other places in the Midwest like Dallas, we're a little bit better, but we are also smaller than Dallas Fort Worth area.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I that was just like the most sprawled out city that I can think of that's like
Mhm.
very highway and car focused. I guess I know you from Lemons. How'd you get started in 24 Hours of Lemons? What brought you to that?
24 Hours of Lemons is a really interesting story. So it really started around 2012, 2013. I started hearing and reading about these wacky races that were happening all over the country. It's seemingly at random. And I would say, wait, they were racing what with what? And I got really interested, but years and years went on, and I said, oh, maybe next year. Oh, maybe next year. And in 2017, I said, look, there's enough delays. I've got the money, I've got the time. What's stopping me? So I said, I'm going to get into the community. I'm going to get a car and I'm going to race it. And that's going to be my goal. So Scott, who you interviewed, actually offered me their old Geo. And I said, nah, that's not lemony enough. Let me get something truly crazy. And this team in 2017 built a 1998 Cadillac DeVille race car. Now, if you know anything about mid 90s to mid 2000s Cadillacs, they have this V8 engine called the North Star V8. It
Oh
was
yeah.
Cadillac's first double overhead cam V8, and it made 300 horsepower, and you're like, oh, that's really good power. And the problem is they had this head stud design that under increased heat, the head studs would stretch, and they would stretch over the cylinders in such a way that they would pop the head gasket cylinder to cylinder. It was a fatal flaw. It was addressed in later like mid 2000 engines. So, like if you have a 2004 and up North Star, they're usually pretty good. But the worst years, 1997, 1998, 1999. Every time, it's like a ticking time bomb. I knew this. I reached out and I said, hey, I want to buy your car. It was for sale in Texas. It was for sale outside of Dallas. And I said, first things first, did you fix this problem? And there's this head stud kit that you can buy and install stronger head studs. And they sent me picture after picture saying, "Oh, we replaced the head gaskets, we replaced the studs. It should be a wonderful engine." We took it. They did a 2017 Houston MSR race, and Houston is flat. MSR is a nice road course, but it's very flat. There's no elevation change. Not really stressing the car. And they said, the car ran great. We had a great time, but now we want to move on and run something faster. So I said, sure. They were selling it for $1,000, or $1,100. And I said, let me borrow a truck. I got the truck. I went down to Dallas. I got a U-Haul. I hauled it back from Dallas to Denver. And then I said, okay, I need to get a team. I brought the car out to Cars and Coffee a few times, and that's where I met James. James actually lived about 10, 15 minutes away and was also an MR2 enthusiast. So I said, look, we're going to need people, so let's just, let's go on from here. And then we added a couple other people who were interested in getting into lemons. And by September 2018, we had a team, we had a running car, and the car passed tech, and we were ready to go racing. I took the first stint. I did about 45 minutes, and I went off the course twice. My first ever Lemons race, after 3 laps, I was really racing, not just sort of cruising, and I boiled the brake fluid after 3 laps. So
Oh, wow.
I was
Okay.
going into the first corner, and I went straight off. I put my foot down, and I had no brakes, absolutely none.
That's
I went
scary.
in for my penalty. Judge Phil was my first penalty. He's like, well, you're one of the first, penalties of the race. What were you doing wrong? And I said, I had no brakes. And he said, you're in a Cadillac DeVille on a racetrack. You shouldn't be racing. You should be on a Sunday drive. So change your mentality. And I went back out there. I think I did another 5 or 6 laps. And then I went off a little bit because it's a huge car. It's like 4,000 pounds dry. 4,500, I think, is the official. And it's a huge car on a racetrack filled with Miatas and Geos, and you're trying to be wheel to wheel, but you can't. You're taking up the entire corner. So I gave it to my next competitor, James, and James took it out for a full stint. And then we gave it to our third competitor, and he brought it out, and he said, the car is limping, it's misfiring, something's wrong. We brought it into the pits, and we checked. Head gasket failure. 36 laps. 36 laps into a race, we had a head gasket failure. We did something because there was no head gaskets we could find for miles and miles around this middle of the race. We went into town. We got the Blue Devil head gasket in a can where you pour the head gasket fluid into the radiator and you hope it gunks up. So it takes a while. Engine has to be cold, and then you have to run the engine, and then you have to make it work. And, we waited until the second day. We attempted to fix the head gasket. The sealant appeared to be working. The white smoke stopped smoking out of the tailpipe. We thought we'd solved our problem. We brought the car back out into a race. And again, race environments stresses out a car. So after about another lap, the car had gone back into limp mode and was profusely smoking. So we said, let's just save the car. Let's limp it around. Let's get across the finish line for that last lap. And that's what we did. And we called it a win. And that was our first race experience.
Yeah, nice. I think those head studs that they designed on the early North Stars were I think it was called torque to yield or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
where they would torque it until the bolt stretched basically a certain amount. And they didn't have any the threads were just cut into the aluminum block. So those would often pull out the threads. And I believe that kit that you're talking about, the solution is basically drill out those threads and put a steel insert in so that
Yep.
it holds it has more area to grip or something like that. Is that the kit that the team had on there?
That is the kit, but you know how you have like two or three options when you replace a head gasket? You've got the like a $50 option, the
Okay.
$90 option, and then like the $150 option.
Yeah.
They went with the cheapest head gasket,
Yeah.
and that's what failed.
Gotcha.
So I was talking with a few of the teammates. The mechanic wouldn't talk to me about it because he's like, "Oh, everything I did was perfect. You know, the car ran great." And then one of the other teammates who said, "Oh yeah, we did the cheapest head gasket. We're bracing on a budget." And I'm like, there's things you can cheap out on, but if it's engine related, you really can't.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna take the heads off anyways, you're gonna deal with timing chains and all that bullshit, taking manifolds off. You might as well, get the good head gaskets.
You
I talked
know,
about this before on another podcast, but like when I had my old Miata, I replaced the coolant temp sensor like 5 times because I got the cheapest one from Rock Auto, and it would fail after like 3 or 4 months or something. So yeah, like this is a little consumer advice for the listener. Don't get the cheapest thing that's possible on your car.
always get the second cheapest one or the third cheapest one
Yeah.
because there's a reason why it's like 50% of the other ones.
Yeah. And then after the Cadillac, you guys got into an MR2, right? The one from
Yeah,
the guys out in Utah. I think we talked a little
no,
bit about this with James, but
so James had the story essentially correct. The builder is a guy who exclusively builds MR2s and Toyotas in Utah. That's his joy. That's what he loves to do. And he built this for a Utah race, I think in the like 2012, 2013. That was its first race. And then he said, "Okay, this is a piece of junk. I'm going to move on. I'm going to get a different chassis or basis." So this car was themed as the Mormon Meteor, which was a drag car at the Utah Salt Flats. Now, to get it look like the Mormon Meteor, they had to put extremely heavy steel in the form of a nose cone on the front of a car. Now, the teams that raced the car subsequently would complain, "Oh, this car has an overheating problem." And when we got the car in 2018 after the Cadillac was kaput. We knew it was kaput. Our head gasket had not worked as a solution, and we were just walking around the pits. And there's this Lemons judge who then owned it, and he said, I've raced this car. I don't want to tow it back. Do you want to buy this car? And I said, how much do you want to sell it for? And he said, $2,000. And $2,000 for running and driving Lemon's car is not a bad deal. And the thing is, I had owned MR2s, AW11 MR2s in the past. James owned an MR2. Our third team member, Marcus, he owned an MR2. And we looked at each other and said, we all know these cars. We all like working on these cars. Toyotas are usually a joy to work on because everything is logical and thought out. And it's like, we already spent all this money investing in racing. Let's try to do this again, but do this well. So we said, let's just pony up some money and pay for it. And we got him to tow it back to our teammate's garage in Colorado Springs. And the first thing we did is address the overheating problems. How did we address the overheating problems? We tore off that stupid steel nose cone and we got a stock bumper and we slapped it on there and we said, okay, let's see if it still overheats. And guess what? It didn't.
yeah,
It was just preventing the air from entering the radiator. So by getting the air back to flow through the radiator, no overheating problems.
yeah, and MR2s don't have like a real big grill or anything. So like if you're blocking off any portion of that, it's
Yeah, they're I think it's called the bottom feeder design. So it sucks the air from underneath the bumper and it goes up. And it's really not a bad design. They use it on Civics, they use it on Tauruses, they've used it on a lot of cars from the mid '80s into the mid '90s. So you had that fad of like the big nose, the big, not even a grill, and like the gaping maw of a mouth, and it would just suck it in. It's a nice design. It actually works really well thermodynamically because you take this cool air and it sucks up and then it spits out warm air. It's really nice.
Yeah, and a lot of people will put the vents in the hood, cut vents in the hood
Mm-hmm.
to allow that hot
Mm-hmm.
air to go up.
No, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I
Sorry, I cut you off there. What were you saying?
don't. We raced that car. There was 2 races in 2018. It was the first double race here in Colorado, and we raced it in the. Oh, I meant to say June for the earlier race. The second race was the September race. So it was June 2018 was the Cadillac, and September 2018 was the MR2. And we actually used the same theme on both cars. So the theme was Holy Crap Racing, and there was a giant paper mache poo on the top of the Cadillac. And we said, why even bother thinking of a new theme? We're just going to take that old theme and transplant it onto the new car. So we did the same theme. We got the same poo. We put it on the new car. We latched it down and went racing. And the funny thing is, it's an 80s MR2. It's never going to be the fastest thing out there. But seeing a giant poo zooming along the straightaways is the most ridiculous thing and the most eye-catching thing out there. And we even got mentions from Lonnie Unser. She was racing and she said, it's not lemons unless you
Oh,
see a
okay.
giant poo strapped to somebody's roof. And we were like, yes, now we've made it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you definitely were one of the more out there themes. I really liked the second theme that you did that was the A&W root beer. Because
This
it's
is this is such a yeah, go for it.
because it's a AW11 chassis code. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little nerdy, but I appreciated it.
The thing about Good Lemons themes, there's like you get like something that everybody can get, and there's something that like almost nobody can get, and then you get that one guy that gets every bit, and he's like, I see what you're doing there, and you're like, yes, just for you, just for you. It's like, so most people were like, A&W root beer, that's a good theme. They never went racing, and we're like, yeah, you don't get it. So our race car is the A&W, and then the numbers were 111. So, A&W 11, AW 11, AW 11 chassis code for a MR2.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember exactly how Toyota does chassis codes, but like I think that it's like the first letter is the family of engine that they come with. So like the more famous chassis code is AE86. So the Aichiroku, the Torino Corolla rear drive thing that all the drifters want, has the same basic engine as the MR2. And I don't know where I was going with that.
That's okay. No, you're right on the money. So we'll go with the 3 generations of MR2. There's AW, there's SW, and then there's ZW. So the
Yeah,
AW11 uses the 4AGE. The SW uses the S engines, which is the 3S GE and the 3S GTE, and then the ZW use the 2ZZ or the 1ZZ. I think it came with a 1ZZ, and the
I
2ZZ
think
is a very easy swap.
yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, the 2ZZ is the one that comes in like the Celica GTS and the higher end versions of the like Corolla and Matrix and stuff.
Yep, that's the one. And it's a great motor that got put in a lot of subpar and lame cars, like the Scion XB.
Oh, really? I thought that was a 1Z motor in those.
Oh no, that's yeah. The 2Z. Oh man, this is like in the depths of trivia. Okay, we're not gonna go that far.
Yeah, no, this is some nerd shit that our listeners probably don't care about, but
AZ.
but I would like to do a 2Z swap on my MR2 if I had the time and money for that. but or if the A series engine blew up on mine, but it's I don't know, it's running fine just now. So we'll see. Um,
The joke in Lemons is, legendary Toyota reliability. So the joke in Lemons is the most reliable engine that you could think of for a Toyota. When you put it in lemons, it explodes.
yeah, they were talking about that on one of their videos recently, like the 22R truck motor is supposed to be like one of
Mm-hmm.
the more reliable engines out there, and for whatever reason, they just have trouble in Lemons. I think it's like what you were talking about, the endurance racing aspect of it, where you're getting everything real hot and putting a lot of strain on the components that you wouldn't normally just commuting or driving around or whatever.
Yeah, it definitely finds every weak spot. So
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess one of the major reasons I wanted to talk to you is that you drive a train for RTD for light rail. So I know you got started doing buses and then worked your way up to trains. Like, how'd you get started on that? And what's the day to day, or what's it the experience of working there like for you?
okay, I'm gonna do one correction. This
Yeah.
is a
Sorry.
heavy rail train.
Oh, excuse me.
RTD has. That's okay. It's okay. It's a common misconception, especially since there's like no correct propaganda. So think of trolleys as a light rail and
Okay.
heavy rail as much more like a intercity train.
Okay.
So, uh, like I said, I'm just going to stress that point because there are different levels, and I'm happy to talk about them. I started in RTD actually in 2018 as well. I was working as a taxi driver before that. Fun life choice.
I didn't know
I got
that.
into taxi driving. Well, I got into taxi driving just as Uber and Lyft were really killing it,
Ah.
and I had some fun, but there wasn't really money to be had. It was just enough to live on.
Yeah.
Anyway, I applied for RTD. I actually applied a rail as a light rail driver, and I got to the interview, and it's the manager of HR. She said, "What do you really want to do?" I was like, "Oh, I've always wanted to drive trains and buses." And she's like, "Well, you'll probably make a little bit more money on the bus side. Do you want to just go over there?" And I was like, "Sure." When you go to RTD, you have to go through bus driving school, and that's basically you get your CDL type B. There's A, B, and C. So your CDL with B is long coaches, and then I have a passenger and air brake endorsement. And you spend a month and a half learning how to drive buses really well, and that was fun. I did bus driving for almost 2 years. I really enjoyed it, but there was an internal job opening for commuter rail, and I said, "Ooh, this looks like neat. I would love to do it." Now, light rail 25 years ago, light rail was the easiest and cheapest way to put in mass transit into Denver. In the 1950s, they had ripped up the last of the trolley lines, and then they'd realized, oh no, we went too far. Buses can't do what trolleys really do well, which is move a lot of people in
Yeah.
and out of the city a little bit quicker and more efficiently than buses. But light rail is they can run on city streets, and you don't need a train driver's license. A light rail vehicle falls under uh, a CDL type of license.
Okay.
They operate in this loophole. It's this legal gray area, so you can operate a light rail vehicle without having to be the FRA version of a driver's license. So you can have a CDL and operate a light rail vehicle, and that's why they're called light rail, the
Okay.
LLV. Um, so light rail, really good. For commuter rail, they needed us to get our um, I have my license right here. Our FRA 240 242. So it's 240 dot or slash 242. They're for the engineer and conductor license. It's a federal license. It basically means the federal government says that you are good enough to drive trains. That actually took about a month and a half of in classroom work, learning about trains, train handling, air brakes, other brakes, brake tests, signals, and your engines that you're going to be working on. And then about 3 to 3.5 months, you have to do about 160 hours of actual in cab train driving, and then a written and a practical test. And you have to pass all these, and you have to get like 85% or better on everything and 100% on signals. And that's the process that I went through for getting a train license. So I started last year in May of 2020. And by the time September came around, I was fully qualified and ready to work as a engineer conductor.
Cool.
And for our train nerds out there, RTD runs Hyundai Rotem. Rotem is the heavy industry part of Hyundai, and we do Silverliner V, Silverliner fives, and they're mass produced in Philadelphia with the main components coming from Korea. Korea, and they do pretty well. They use them in SEPTA, Southeast Philadelphia Transportation Authority. I think that's the acronym.
Yeah.
And they use Silverliner fours, which are just a mild variation. And they can, in theory, run 100, 125 miles an hour, no problem. In Colorado, they are limited to 79 miles an hour because Colorado didn't want to pay for quote unquote high speed rail. You've got two levels. If you go above 80 miles an hour, it's considered high speed rail, and you have to pay different taxes or pay for different qualifications. So, 79 is pretty fast.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've
That's
definitely hit 80, 81, 82 on occasion. But there are things to stop you from going that fast. So
hey, I won't tell anyone.
that's
That's pretty cool.
it's a pretty. I love it. When I'm out operating, I have a great day. You know, I've always been passionate about trains. Growing up, I was the kid who watched Thomas the Tank Engine up to an absurdly like old age, and I would say, "Hey, let's have a fun day. Let's go out and watch trains." And I would be on road trips, and I would count the cars as we passed a train, and go to the Colorado Railroad Museum. And whenever we would go on vacation, I would say, "Let's go to a train museum. Let's see a train." And now that I'm an adult, I still do that stuff. I'm planning a road trip through North Carolina and Tennessee, and Tennessee has like the Great Smoky Mountain Railroad, and North Carolina has this giant roundhouse full of trains, and I'm psyched just to see more. I work with this stuff every day. I shouldn't be this excited, but I am.
No, that's cool. Yeah, and you reminded me of something when I used to work at a business that was near the intersection of Highway 6 and Sims. And I was talking to this older guy there, and he's like, I remember when, because they were just putting up the new light rail lines over there. This was, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, like 2007 or so. And that guy was like,
Right.
I remember when they tore up all the old trolley lines in this area. I took it the last day or whatever, and now they're putting in new ones. So yeah, like I think I didn't know that they had that sort of oops, we got rid of too much capacity sort of moment. But I know that there was a lot of that sort of tearing up of old lines in the 40s and 50s, like kind of like what they talk about in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Well, yeah. Roger Rabbit is a perfect example. Denver has a really interesting history with trains. Not even with we can talk about like the big trains like Union Pacific. And we can also talk about the little ones. Denver had this wonderful thing called the Denver Tramway Company. The Denver Tramway Company consisted of tramway lines, which are really like trolley lines, but they insisted they called them tramways, or trams. And by the 1930s, they had this giant system consisting of intercity and intra-city. So they had lines going up and down Colfax on major like streets like Broadway, and they would go for miles and miles and miles, and people use them. For the longest time, you didn't need to have a car to get in and out of downtown Denver. You would take a tram. They even had ones that would go to Golden, ones that would go to Boulder. It's ridiculous. And one of, I mean, conspiracy theories abound, but Gates Rubber set up their factory in Denver. Gates Rubber, for those who don't know, Denver or Colorado history, is this giant manufacturer of tires.
Yeah.
And Gates Rubber said, hey, Denver, y'all should be driving cars because then we can sell more tires to you. And they started aggressive campaigns in the 1940s and 50s about, every American deserves to have a car. This is and then the highway system that was being built from the 30s into the 40s opened up, and people realized, oh, this is a wonderful way to get around. And that killed a lot of smaller subway, tram, streetcar lines. It's a really interesting history. There's a couple of really good books. I can find them. I'm like looking around my desk. I can't find them right now. But the history of this is the history of America. So yeah, hindsight is 2020. I mean, Roger Rabbit is the perfect example. They're tearing up the streetcar lines to make way for the highway because the highway is seen as the future. Interstate driving, but really it killed any semblance of public transit on a lot of cities.
Yeah, definitely. And you can kind of see like the remains of that system, in the Denver area if you look for it. Like just the fact that a lot of the suburbs have like their own little downtown core, the old town part of,
Mm-hmm.
let's say Arvada or Golden or Littleton or Aurora or whatever, that is basically where the train station used to be. So you have a dense little suburban core. Or maybe am I wrong?
No, you're exactly right. And it came down to neighborhoods. Neighborhoods were built around streetcars, and the zillionaires that designed neighborhoods said, I'm going to build a streetcar line to my suburb, and then all the houses are going to be clustered around these streetcars. So it's not that people want to live there, you make it more attractive. There's also a streetcar project, and they would point out all the buildings that were built around trolley infrastructure. So I live by City Park. City Park and Colorado Boulevard used to be the edge of Denver, and there were trolley lines that would come out here. But you can drive down what's now called Bruce Randolph Boulevard. Now, Bruce Randolph Boulevard isn't much to look at, but if you drive up and down Bruce Randolph Boulevard, you will see something very interesting. Where most houses face east or west, on Bruce Randolph Boulevard, they all faced north and south into the street. And because Bruce Randolph used to be the streetcar line, and the neighborhood grew up around that line.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cool, interesting tidbits I could go into, but I'm gonna cut myself off there. Go read the book. I'll be sure to find it soon.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing. I think it's like the history of Denver's streetcars and trams.
Okay.
So,
yeah, if we can if we can confirm that, we'll put the link in the comments or the description or whatever of the podcast for that. Well, cool. Yeah, I didn't know a lot about that, but that's pretty interesting. So you talked a little bit about how you got started with, being a rail fan and all that. Like, I know you were posting something on social media recently about something called a wigwag that you were pretty excited about, and I didn't quite understand what that was, but it's a type of signal or something. Is that right?
It's a really rudimentary signal for when a train is approaching. So right now we have the crossing gate arm system, where a train is approaching. It by the train and the steel wheels, it completes a circuit that tells that the if the train is moving at its top speed, it'll cross the crossing in about 15 to 20 seconds, and that allows the arms to drop. But crossing arms are kind of crazy. If you look at them, they've got a giant counterweight and a giant arm, and they drop down and then they drop back up, and that requires a motor to move one direction and then move the other. So Santa Fe used this idea of a wigwag. So a wigwag is a single red light on a pole, and the pole is connected to a motor inside the mount. So there's the mount. It comes up about 5 feet, and then there's the motor, and then the motor moves the pole back and forth in a articulated motion. So it would reach an apex and swing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So Santa Fe had this idea. Look, it's just one motor and it only runs one direction. And when it hits the apex of this, it'll hit a bell. So one motor will hit the moving thing, and the light would illuminate. So a light would illuminate, the thing would move, and you'd have a bell. So you've got something auditory, something visual, and something illuminating. And by having those three things, you can get people's attention.
Yeah.
If there's loud music, you might not hear the bell, but you'll see it move and you'll see the light. If you're not looking for the light or the movement, you'll hear the bell and you'll know the train's coming. So that's why you have those three things. And the thing about that is that was how the artisan ATSF, the artisan I can't say it. The ATSF, the Topeka Santa Fe Railroad, did it. And I went to go see one in northeast Colorado. It was by La Junta,
Okay.
and I went to go see it because there was word going around that they were going to take this mainline one down. And I said, look, there's only one train that runs through there every few days. I got to go and at least see it in action. And I was like, I've got the time. Why not? So, a 3 hour drive, 4 hour drive later, I was there and I watched the Amtrak Southwest Chief roar past. And it was honestly a great, great experience. And now it's gone. They removed it. They're putting it up at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado. But it won't be the same as a main line because its preservation is not the same as seeing it in real life.
Yeah.
There's a reason why people like seeing things wild in nature, because you're seeing them as they were intended. Seeing a lion in Africa being a lion versus seeing a lion at the zoo. You're seeing a lion where the lion is meant to be versus at a zoo where a lion is because it can't be anywhere else.
Yeah. That's cool. I still haven't been up to that museum in Golden. I've been driven past it a couple times, like when they had busloads of kids for one of those like Thomas the Tank Engine events that they had going on there. I was like, what in the hell is going on over there? But I've never actually been inside. It looks pretty interesting. I'll have to check it out someday.
That museum was the brainchild of another like rail fan in the 50s and 60s, and he saw that narrow gauge was disappearing from Colorado at a alarming rate. So he said, "Look, I'm gonna get all this stuff together. I'm gonna get people together, and I want to preserve what I can." So they had a railroad motel in Alamosa. Then they bought land in Golden, and every train track and train you see there was brought there from somewhere else and preserved. So it's kind of crazy, to think, holy moly, they built all this just for the love of trains. But it's really amazing when you look at all the stuff they have preserved there.
Yeah, and that reminds me. I'm. Have you ever been on the what's it called, Durango Silverton Railway, the
I
narrow
have.
gauge? Yeah, I haven't been there since I was a kid, but it's pretty interesting. It's the last, I think, narrow gauge railway in operation in Colorado, at least.
That's essentially correct. You've actually got a couple. The Durango and Silverton one. There's one that goes through Colorado New Mexico border.
Okay.
Um, there's the Georgetown Loop railroad, which is actually owned by the state of Colorado and run as like a nonprofit.
Okay.
But Colorado is actually a really great place to be a rail fan. You've got a lot of diversity with what goes on in Colorado. You've got not just one or two, but like three places that can steam up old coal-fired and redone oil locomotives, and that's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not so much of a rail fan, but I am kind of a steam engine nerd. So, you know, that whole narrow gauge railway, and there's the mining museum in Colorado Springs that has the old steam engines there, which are pretty cool. So yeah, there's some cool
Right.
stuff in Colorado.
I think growing up here definitely made me more of a rail fan than I already was.
Yeah, cool. What is there any sort of like holy grail of train, either train or train hardware that you haven't seen yet that you want to see in person?
In May 2019, May 2019, I went and I saw the Big Boy, and I saw it depart from Cheyenne when it started crossing the country. The Big Boy, for those who don't know trains, is the largest, heaviest steam locomotive ever built in North America. I think it displaces something like 150 tons. It's ridiculously huge, and Union Pacific decided to take it out of preservation and restore it, and took something like almost 9 years, 10 years, just because Union Pacific can do that. They're a giant organization. There's a couple of things that I would love to do. I want to go and ride on a high speed train in China or Japan. I want to experience a maglev train, of which there's only a few in operation. I know there's one in Shanghai. I know that there's another one in Korea. I want to do a cross country or cross continent train trip. So I thought about doing it across North America, but then I said, if we're gonna do it, let's do London, Paris, Paris to like Berlin, and maybe Berlin to somewhere else, like cross continent Europe train, because there's no comparison. Europe, they never really ripped up or dismantled their passenger train infrastructure. America has a hollow shell of what it used to be. I mean, it's like really just pales in comparison to what it used to be. But this this summer, I'm gonna take a mini train trip. I'm gonna go from North Carolina, Charlotte, all the way up to the East Coast, and I'm gonna just enjoy it.
Yeah, that makes me think. With RTD, I mean, I imagine that's a union job, and you get pretty good benefits like vacation and that sort of thing. Paid time off.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
your experience with the union? I know we didn't put this
Oh,
in the questions that I sent you,
we
but
didn't prepare for this, but I'm okay with talking about this. I think a union is a double edged sword, because you've got a lot of egos when it comes to union membership and leadership. You've got two types of major union in the United States. You've got the union that will work for your rights and protect your rights. So, let's just say paid holidays and weekends. Those are both things that unions got for everyone. The reason the common American doesn't work on the weekend, you can thank unions.
Yeah.
That's an amazing benefit because, they were just working men, women, and children to the bone for the company. Then you've got the union that will protect you after bad things happen. So the common thing on the bus and trains is accidents and fatalities. So if you're driving a bus, and this isn't exactly common, but I mean, it happens. Somebody isn't paying attention, they step out in front of a bus. They could be injured or they could die. And quite often, the family looks for someone to blame. They look and they try to sue the company, and the company could either settle with them or not. And even if they settle with them, then the family might even try to sue the driver. What the union will do is the union will have your back and say, look, your job is protected. We're going to protect your rights and we're going to represent you because you were doing what the company wanted you to do. You were operating the bus as safely as you could. And somebody, unfortunately, stepping in front of the bus, you can only step on the brakes and brake so much before something happens. Or, unfortunately, it's a pretty common way to commit suicide.
Yeah.
The top ways that people think about committing suicide are usually jumping off of a bridge, stepping in front of a bus, or walking in front of a train.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that, but
But to get back to the point about unions, the union, I would say RTD is a mixture of the two. You've got the union that they're advocating for our rights, and they're trying their best to represent us fairly. This comes to one of the points where I have prior knowledge and I can't speak anymore on that subject. I will also say that our leadership right now is a very good leadership. I know the union president, I know my representation, and I have to say that I feel very confident that they are advocating for me. The thing that the union does is they go to management and they say, look, we have 1,500 employees across light rail, commuter rail, and bus. And, these employees have a demand for a higher wage and better health and any sort of compensation that they are fairly due. And management will say, okay, here's our new contract. We can offer you so much for a raise. And, they work back and forth and they negotiate a fair contract. That's the benefit of collective bargaining. That's the real joy of collective bargaining, because collective bargaining means you as a whole are represented, and you say, if our needs or demands are not getting met, we will protest and not work. And imagine trying to get 1,500 bus driving positions filled if we strike. They can't. Yeah. So there have been a couple times that RTD drivers and operators have striked, and it usually doesn't last for very long. But we're all told when we enter the union that you should be prepared for that day. If something happens, they say, COVID-19 is a very good public. Bus drivers are considered essential. And we were at risk of contracting COVID-19 because, we're very exposed. So a person who is sick would get on the bus, talk to the bus driver. There's nothing there protecting him, not even a little barrier. So, the union, I'm not saying this happened. I don't know anything about how the union responded to COVID-19 in this regard, but management said once COVID looks like it was going to stick around, that they are going to find a way to protect drivers, because if they didn't, we could say, hey, management, you didn't protect us when we needed it. We're now going to demand protection. If you don't fulfill that, we are going to strike. That would be, I mean, public health in general, but that's a very public way. If you can't protect your workers, why are you employing us? We could find other jobs that protect us more. So that's the benefit of collective bargaining.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's definitely some unions are better than others, but like, generally speaking, like if you have a problem with your workplace, maybe you, like you said, you need protective equipment or you need more money or something. If you just go to your boss by yourself, he's going to tell you to get lost, 9 times out of 10. But if 1,500 people band together and say, we all need this same thing, the boss has to listen to that. So, yeah, definitely. That's a good endorsement of collective bargaining, I think.
I think it's the literal representation of power to the people,
Yeah.
because whereas one demand is, weak, the if you come as a group, your demands are taken seriously.
Yeah, I know that economics professor Richard Wolff talks a lot about unions and calls it democracy in the workplace, basically. So, and
Yeah,
that my limited experience with unions, I worked at a grocery store that was unionized. I didn't at the time. I didn't really feel like getting involved with the union at all, and I didn't. And I kind of wish I had. But if you're in a unionized workplace, you really and you want to change something about the workplace, show up to the union meeting and get involved with it. If you don't, you get what you put into it. Basically, is what I'm saying. Like,
exactly.
yeah. So I guess when we were first getting ready for this interview, and I sort of told you the concept of the podcast, you had said, one of the things that you wanted to talk about was when you were growing up in Israel and the socialized medicine system that they have there.
Yes and no. So I did grow. I did. I was born in Israel.
Okay.
Yes, that's very important. But unfortunately, I moved out of Israel when I was very young, about a year and a half old, and I came to live in the Denver, Colorado. It was pretty much a straight move. The experience I've had with socialized medicine is in 2017. In 2017, I didn't have a job. I had plenty of savings, and I said, look, I'm going to take a few months. I'm going to go to Israel. I'm just going to do the, bum around, stay at hostels, have a good time. And one of these times I was in Israel, and I started to have really intense headaches and fever. And, in America, to diagnose this stuff, you would have to go to at least one doctor, one specialist, and even then, you might not get seen for days or weeks. Saying, "Oh yeah, our schedule is full. You'll have to visit us, when you can." In Israel, the experience was great. So they have health clinics in every city, and they're pretty easy. You can even walk up and say, "I need somebody to see me." So you walk in, and the physician, you wait around. You walk in, you wait around, you sign up, and then the physician comes in. And in Israel, a lot of people speak English, so I was really fortunate. I didn't have to rely on my elementary level Hebrew. But he said, "What's the problem?" And I said, "Well, I've had a headache, my teeth hurt, I have a fever, and it hasn't gone away for like 48 hours." He said, "Okay, sounds like you need antibiotics." So I said, "Yeah, that would be great." And he said, "Okay, here's a prescription. Go to the corner store. It's free. Just, show them this and you'll get antibiotics." And I said, "That's it?" And he said, "Yeah, that's it. That's how it works here." So I literally went to the drugstore down the street. I showed them the paper. They gave me antibiotics. And the next day I was feeling great. And honestly, that's how medicine should be. You're
Yeah.
not feeling good. You go see a professional immediately, and they say, "Okay, this is my first course." It shouldn't have to require more than those steps. In America, it's not always that easy to do. If I had to see someone, maybe it was an urgent care, maybe it's an ER, but even then it's going to be time and money and aggravation and frustration. In Israel, it was literally maybe an hour or two of just getting there and getting everything done. And by the next day, I was feeling great. And that's how socialized medicine is. Israel did a great job with their COVID-19 vaccination rollout because they literally do have these cores of like medical professionals in every city, every town, every village. And, everybody knows socialized medicine is you go to the doctor, you get medicine, in this case, a vaccine, and then you feel better.
Yeah.
What else is there?
I think I did see some anti-vax demonstrations in Israel, but I think it has been pretty smooth rollout, right? I don't know the
Yeah,
whole
but you
details,
get
but
the same. Yeah, well, okay. You get the same religious nuts or, anti vaxxers who are, saying, oh, we don't believe this was, instructed to us by God. And, they also protested, why can't we have in person services at our synagogues? And
right.
Israel was like, we're trying to do our best to stop the spread of COVID-19. So one of the main guys, let's call him the head, the head, the high, the highest, the biggest vocal objector about in-person services. He's like, oh, I'm gonna still have these services, and like a month later, he gets the COVID-19, and he's like, oh, I made a huge mistake. So you got these people in America too.
Oh yeah. Oh
It's
yeah.
just the different thing. I mean,
I know some of
anti-vaxxers
them,
are
so
anti-vaxxers. It's I know I have that one Facebook friend that I've been friend with forever, and I sort of just like tolerate their shenanigans. But
yeah.
it's also important to say I see it, I hear it, and I understand it, because when you have a global community or even a local community, you've got to tolerate and understand what everybody brings to the table, even the people you object to.
Yeah. That's fair enough.
We're
I
talking about. Oh, you go ahead.
I was going to say I myself, when I was growing up, one of my parents was in the military, and we had the TRICARE insurance, which was kind of similar to what you described. Maybe it wasn't like Cadillac healthcare, but we could just show up to the clinic on the base, and some guy in fatigues would take your temperature or whatever. It was it was I'm sure there was some sort of copay or whatever, but it was basically free. I remember going to the doctor for all kinds of silly things that, today, if I had to pay for, I would not bother to go to the doctor. I would just go to, look it up on WebMD and probably think that I had cancer for a couple days until it got better. But yeah,
Israel has a really interesting way of paying for subsidized or even state-run medicine. You pay a tax, and you pay a tax on every little thing. I think it's called variable action tax, and that goes to fund streets, transportation, health, and services.
oh yeah,
So by
VAT.
paying
Yeah,
VAT,
yeah.
every Israeli.
I think it's
Go
value
ahead.
added tax or something like that.
That's it. Value
Yeah,
added
yeah,
tax. But VAT is on everything. VAT is on everything, but the benefits are when you need these services, they're there and they're available and they're funded. And that's
yeah,
the problem that America also has, is how do we fund our big projects? How do we fund medicine? How do we fund transportation? Well, if everybody paid into it, then everybody could take out of it, and it's something that hasn't really caught on.
yeah. I haven't really looked into the arguments for and against value added tax, but I mean, there's different tax schemes. There's different ways we could pay for it. Like, I mean, if we can pay for the military budget in this country, we could pay for healthcare. It's not it's a drop in the bucket compared to that, you know.
Yeah.
But I guess real easy, simple question for you. Nothing too complex, but what's your opinion on the Israel-Palestine conflict?
Oh, that's a real head scratcher. That's
Yeah,
no easy question. Um, I am an Israeli citizen, so I have to already say I am biased in my opinion. I will say this: growing up in America has prevented me from a lot of, I would say, area-induced biases about Palestinians. I will also say that their claims are valid as well as the state of Israel's claims, but you can't have two people occupying the same place saying that they both have valid claims. So, in a perfect world, I'd say, a shared country would be wonderful. In a real world, I'd say it's probably not going to happen or never going to happen the way we want it to. And a good idea would sort of make Jerusalem like an international city state. If you have Jerusalem as an international city state, then all three major religions claimed, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, they all have claims on Jerusalem. You say nobody is in control, no one religion rules supreme. We all have this place that we come to, and that way, if it was like an international city state, like let's say the Vatican, you could eliminate a lot of the problems. One of the major problems of Israel is that it's a nationality based state, so it's known as the Jewish state. The flag is literally the Star of David, and you have people who object to that idea. I'm not especially nationalistic in that regard. I think Judaism should have a state, but maybe making it first and foremost, it's it's known as the Jewish democracy, and then the question is, which part is more important, the Jewish part or the democracy part? Because
yeah,
democracy means everybody gets a say, and if you make it Jewish first, bold letters, you're obviously saying even in democracy, Judaism gets the highest say, and it, it is a hard fact to deal with if you're trying to incorporate Palestinians, Palestine, or any other nationalities in your country. I don't know if there's ever going to be a good solution. I think things can't always stay as they are. Israel is a protectorate for a lot of things, but they're also an occupying force. So until they stop being an occupying force, like the British before them, you know, natives are always going to hate a force that's occupying. And, even if your claim is good, the fact that you're using military might to occupy a land is going to hurt you politically in the long run. So there's no good solution, but that's what it is.
yeah. I That's a good answer. I very diplomatic. Yeah, I guess we just solved the whole thing in like 5 minutes. So, but
There,
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's no easy solution, but yeah, there's I don't know. I don't know if I should say any more.
I mean, it's a hard question. There's no good answer. There's no right or wrong. So, uh, it, it should be enough to say that the current situation is not ideal, and hopefully something can change. Maybe the leadership, maybe the politics, maybe the politics and the leadership of all the countries surrounding it.
Yeah,
I mean, Saudi Arabia is a good example. Saudi Arabia used to have really hostile ties with Israel, and they've slowly been getting better at just acknowledging that they're a country, allowing flights to fly over Saudi Arabia on the way to Israel. because they used to not even let flights fly over Saudi Arabia if they're down for Israel, because they would say, why would you want to go to that country? That country doesn't exist to us. So, if things change, maybe not like the Egyptian change of like 2009, 2010, when,
Yeah.
they overthrew their government and things sort of erupted, but maybe more like slower, less drastic change, at least in the politics of the area. I mean, geopolitics hold a huge reason why Israel has such a big military force, and they feel like they need to. So
Yeah.
if things change, maybe they can get better.
Well, and I mean, not to mention the U.S. subsidizes a lot of the Israeli military and the Egyptian military, for that matter. And Saudi Arabian military, and probably some other ones that I'm forgetting in the area.
Geopolitics is really hard in this
Yeah.
area, especially since American contracts run a lot of the Middle East.
Right.
In basically, in for having a stable Middle East, even if it's heavily armed, a stable Middle East is good for geopolitics because the price of oil doesn't drastically swing. And if OPEC decided to charge $20 a barrel, it could mess with America politics too. So I
Yeah.
see a lot of people blaming American politicians for the price of gasoline, and I say, you realize those two things are not related. The you know
Not
the
directly,
the
at
cost of
least.
gasoline is based on supply and demand.
Yeah. So, I know that you've had a lot of interesting cars. A lot of them have been GM products, at least since I've known you. I saw you making a list a little bit ago of all the different ones. Like, is there any sort of
Yes.
logic, or is it all emotion on what car you're buying, or like what makes like what's I guess
um.
what's the criteria that you look for in a car that you're buying, because you've had some interesting ones.
Oh man. When I buy a car, I try to buy an interesting car.
Yeah.
I've always been interested in cars. I did make a list. It was 16 cars, and one of the cars I bought twice. But my first car was a Honda Civic, a 1992 Honda Civic. That was a pass-me-down car. That was my aunt's car, and then my brother's and my sister's car, and then my car. But the first car I bought on my own was a 1995 Ford Taurus SHO with the
Nice.
5-speed manual transmission.
Is that the
And
V6 one?
I think that is the V6, high output Yamaha V6
Yeah.
that Yamaha and Ford made in collaboration. It was such a weird thing. Like, Yamaha made the heads, and the Ford supplied the block, and it was put in a Taurus.
Right.
There's a thing that Ford was going to try to have like a Fiero mid-engine kind of car, and the sort of fell apart in the early '90s with the probe and everything else. So they said, oh, we'll just stick it in the Taurus. It'll fit in the Taurus. And the Taurus SHO, it's such a weird, funky car. I had a 1999 Jeep Cherokee after that. I had a 1997 Toyota Corolla. I had my first 1987 Toyota MR2 after that. After that, I got another Ford Taurus SHO, a 98, which is the Yamaha engineered and built V8, 3.4 liter displacement. And that's another interesting, weird V8 with the fatal flaw of the cams. They were pressed bearing cams that would eventually slip and ruin your timing on an interference engine. So
Oh.
once your cams went, your engine was gone.
So like
But
the
it was a
cam lobes
fun
are
car.
pressed on to the shaft or whatever?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I could see some
I
problems with
bought
that.
the common fix is to take it apart and weld your cams in place.
Yeah.
But I had this car for about 2.5, 3 months, and after that third month, I spun that bearing in the cam, and my I was limping along on 4 cylinders instead of 8 on a 3,800-pound car. So yeah, it wasn't very happy. I had a 95 Nissan 240 SX convertible,
Nice.
which is a really cool car, except for the fact that it's a convertible and has no body rigidity at all.
Right.
But I bought it. I thought I was going to go drifting with it. I drifted it a few times and then I realized, oh my God, there's no roof. There is no structural rigidity. If I hit anything, I am going to die.
Yeah.
I sold that car. I went a few years without a car when I was doing my taxi driving bit. The first car after I worked for RTD for a couple of months, I bought a 1988 Oldsmobile. Oh, I should say before this is 2018. I got the Cadillac race car, which I don't really include race cars on this list, but when I was working on the Cadillac race car and I was really working on this car, I was like, GM has a really weird like part sharing. So like you can buy a non-Cadillac part and put it on a Cadillac part because it's the same part on a million billion cars. And I was like, there's something to this part sharing. I really enjoy this. You can get cheap parts. I had a bunch of foreign cars and a Jeep and a couple of Tauruses. I'm like, these parts are cheap and these are fun and the engines are pretty well built. This was before the head gasket failure. And I was like, I really enjoy this. Maybe I should look at buying some GM cars. So fast forward, and I see this 1988 Oldsmobile Cutlass Calais. This is the four cylinder 2.3 quad 4 engine. It was a squared engine design, equal bore and it's a funky engine, but it's also a manual transmission front wheel drive car. And I was like, an Oldsmobile with a manual transmission.
Yeah.
I gotta get this car. It was $500. I loved this car. This car was my daily, my beater. I loved driving it, and I bought it with 245,000 miles, and I drove it to 260,000 miles. I ended up giving it to my then girlfriend at the time. She needed a car to get around, and the timing belt shredded itself, and basically all the little things added up that I just didn't want to put $2,000 into it because shops always quote you at it. So I sold it to my friend. That was in 2018. I think I sold it December 2018. After that, I got a 1987 Toyota MR2 with the 5-valve blacktop 4AGE
Nice.
swap, and that was a completed swap. And the guy had wanted to turn it into a race car, so he had ripped out the heater core and basically just left it with like a blower. Oh man, it gets worse. A blower engine, and the windows really didn't work, and it was just not a great car, but it had the great engine and a light chassis, and it loved to run. That was like, oh, I'm gonna have a fun car, have a fun car, just drive around. And then I saw it, the car I've always wanted. I had to buy it. It was a 1995 Cadillac Fleetwood Hearse.
Yeah.
And again, I had been really impressed by GM build quality and engines. And I said, this car looks solid. They had the rollers in the rear ripped out. This mom and pop lumber company wanted to like use it as their delivery. They were kind of kooky, and I got it for $2,000. I kept it for 2 years. I put 20,000 miles on it in 2 years. I drove it everywhere, and it never really let me down. I did have a ball joint fail on me outside of my workplace one day, and this was in the winter. And of course, my only other car was a MR2 with no heater in it in the winter. And now it was suddenly my daily driver. So I bundled up and I hoped that there wouldn't be days that I had to drive it in the freezing cold or actually snowing. And the blower motor kept the defrost working decently, but any sort of ice, I couldn't really use that car. So
Yeah.
I kept that car. That car was a really good Lemon's parts car because now I had the Lemon MR2 and then I had the parts car for the Lemon MR2. I kept those cars for a while. I ended up selling the blacktop. I was going to go to a race event at a local go-kart track. And I said, okay, I'm going to rent a U-Haul. We'll take the race car and you can drive the blacktop. And then I'll have both of my fun cars there on one day. I let my girlfriend, who's never really paid attention in cars, she drove the blacktop and the oil pressure dropped to zero. She didn't
Ooh.
notice.
Yeah.
So I get to the racetrack, I drive it for like one half lap, and the engine starts to clatter. And it also spun a bearing. And blacktop 4AGE MR2s are hard to work on because there's a lot of the blacktop, for those who don't know, is the 5-cylinder valve head that we didn't get in America.
Five
It was
valves per
on the
cylinder.
5 valves per cylinder. It
Yeah.
was exclusively JDM, and it was on the AE 111 Corollas and a couple other JDM market cars. But getting those parts in America are really hard. So I decided I'm going to sell it. I sold the car. I regret it just a little bit, but I still had my hearse, and I was looking around for another cars. I came across a 1994 Toyota MR2, the naturally aspirated, not the turbo. And I was like, oh, this is a cool car. I bought it impulsively, and then I found there was just enormous amounts of rust in the center.
Hmm.
So I ended up selling that to a guy in Chicago. He's rebuilding it. Then again, I have this cycle of getting a car, fixing a car, and then selling a car, and then replacing it. So then I saw a 1989 Alfa Romeo Milano V6, and it's a wonderful, glorious engine V6. It's not the Buso V6, it's the 2.5, which is just under it. That car had electrical issues, and I ended up selling that to another enthusiast. Then I decided to get modern, and now I have the cars that I own right now. A 2010 Chevrolet HHR SS, which is the 2-liter turbocharged Ecotec, and that's a fun front-wheel drive manual transmission car. And then I have a 2006 Pontiac Solstice, and it's the naturally aspirated, not the turbo, the 2.4 Ecotec. I really enjoy that car too, for different reasons. And a couple months ago, in July of 2021, no, July of 2020, my friend who had the 1988 Oldsmobile Cutlass said, "Hey, I just fixed your car. It's been sitting in my driveway for like a year, and I realized I don't want this car. Do you want to buy it back?" And I was like, "Yes." So I ended up buying this car back, and I loved it until I remembered you fell in love with a car for a reason, then you fell out of love with a car for another reason. I said, I can't love this car like somebody else. So I bought the same car twice, and I sold it, and it's now living with new owners. And I've only met them one more time because he didn't register the car, and then it got towed, and then I got sent the tow notice,
Oh yeah.
and I had to explain everything and get that all figured out. But that was a few months ago. That was a fun February. And yeah, that's all the cars I've owned. I'm down to 2 cars right now, and then the race car and the parts car for the race car.
Nice. Yeah, you let me drive the Chevy HHR that one time. It was pretty fun. It's got plenty of power, but it's a little bit torque steery. It's front wheel drive only, so it has a little bit of trouble putting that power down sometimes.
Yeah, and that's with the conservative stock tune. You can do a stage 2 tune, basically just upping the horsepower to around 300.
Wow.
300 through the front wheels.
Yeah.
And then the torque steer goes from like manageable to crazy. And
Yeah.
I've never seen a reason to make it crazy. I've always just been like, this is a fun grocery getter.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, I can do 155 easily. So
Yeah. And is that there was some feature you were showing me? Doesn't it have like some kind of launch control function or something like that?
yeah, Chevrolet wanted to make this okay, this is 2010. This is pre-recession Chevrolet at its best. So it's like we're going to make this family car have a limited slip differential and then a no lift shift feature. So it's a 5-speed manual transmission, but in order for it to accelerate the quickest and keep the turbo spooled, you can go through the gears pretty much without lifting. You know, when you normally shift, you lift off the gas and
Yeah.
you depress the clutch because you don't want them both depressed at the same time. But in this feature, you can keep your foot down on the gas, depress the clutch, and go through the gears, and it won't change the RPM. So you keep your turbo spooled, and you can get a ridiculous like 0 to 60 time. I think it's like somewhere in the 6 seconds. I'll have to double check that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. What do they call it? Like a 2-step or 3-step limit or whatever. I don't know if how it works on your car, if it's like a drive-by-wire throttle or if it like cuts the spark or fuel to
I
keep it at a certain RPM.
don't I don't remember.
Yeah.
Oh, 6.3 seconds
Yeah, that's
to
pretty
0 to
quick.
60 for a weird Chevrolet wagon.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And you just recently got that Solstice. Do you have any plans on changing it or doing anything fun with it, or are you just gonna drive it as is?
Honestly, the last year I've been driving less than enthusiastic cars. I mean, when you drive a hearse, it's not really an enthusiast car. It's a
Yeah.
very fun and questionable decision. Everybody says, "Why a hearse?" And I said, "Because I enjoy it."
Yeah.
But I've wanted something I could take to a racetrack and get better in.
Okay.
So this Pontiac Solstice was for sale, and it was like one neighborhood over, about 5-10 minute drive from me. And I went, and it's decent. It's a 2006 Solstice. It doesn't have any bells or whistles. It's pretty much a base model that somebody put a body kit on, and I was like, that's cool. The looks are kind of love it or hate it. And I said, this would be a fun platform. It's the GM Miata. It
Right.
weighs something like 2,800 pounds, makes 170 horsepower, has a 5-speed manual, rear wheel drive, decently balanced, and a decent suspension. It's kind of cushy, although I have no real suspension anymore. The shocks are completely blown out, so I'm just riding over every crack and pebble on the road. I feel it, but it's fun to drive. And I said I want to go to a track and I want to get better, and you only get better with seat time and having a decent car. So I said, this is going to be my track toy. I'm just going to get it reliable. And you can get the turbo model, the GXP, which has like double the horsepower at like 265, but it kind of negates the whole idea of driving a slow car fast. That's more enjoyable, and you have to learn to drive a slow car fast before you can drive a fast car even better.
Yeah.
So we're all always students, even if we think we aren't, but we're all always learning. And I admit that I haven't had the most track time out of anyone, and I need to learn how to get better. So this is my way of learning.
Cool. Yeah. I something you said earlier, I just thought I just looked this up. That big boy locomotive that you're talking about, is that the Allegheny? Is that the same one? Or am I thinking of something
Allegheny
else?
class. The big boy was, I think, by Alco. The one I saw was specifically number 4014. I think they only made 25, and they were made by Alco. This was built in 1941, and if you look up Union Pacific 4014, you'll find it.
Okay. I'm just curious because I saw a train in the Henry Ford Museum in Detroit or in Dearborn, Michigan. That's I'm not sure if it's the same, but it's a very large locomotive. The Chesapeake and Ohio Allegheny, also from 1941, and what is it, like 7,500 horsepower, 1.2 million pounds.
Yeah.
So on the same scale, I think maybe not the same exact one, but if you're ever in the Detroit area, it's a pretty cool setup that they got there. They've got a few trains and a few like stationary steam engines, and I don't know, it's pretty cool.
I'll have
Uh,
to go and see it. It's on my list. When you come to big locomotives, the big boy is one of the biggest. You can also talk about the Challenger. All locomotives have classes. Big boy was the name of the class, but Challenger was another really big giant, and Union Pacific had a couple of other big ones too.
yeah, um, I'm just looking at it.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah. Oh, huh. It's
Tangent.
saying there's one in the Forney Museum in Denver. Huh.
There is. I think that's 4004. Oh God.
4884
There's a four
or no,
four.
no.
No. 4884 stands for the wheel
Oh, okay, yeah.
classification. You've got two sets of two in the front for leading wheels. You've got four sets of two sets of four per piston. So you've got 488, and then you've got two sets of two underneath the cab to support the weight of the cab, and that's why it's 4884.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Remember the numbers.
4005 is the one in Denver. The number.
So close.
Yeah. Okay, so I was off. It's a totally different train that or locomotive that I was looking at in Michigan, but it's worth looking if you're in that area. That's a pretty cool museum. They've got other stuff too. They've got cars and whatever if you want to look at that. But well, I guess wrapping up here, um, what do you think the future of mass transit looks like in Denver or the USA as a whole? Like maybe ideal vision, and then maybe like a little bit more realistic vision of what you see, what you would like to see, and what you see happening right now, if that makes sense.
Mass transit. Mass transit is a really hard question because there is no good one answer. I think for city to city, we've already figured out that planes are the most efficient and fastest way of getting, from point A to point B.
Quickest, at least.
I think eh,
I don't know about most fuel efficient.
efficiency is based, well, but efficiency based on a lot of other factors. I mean, jet engines are becoming more and more efficient every year, and yes, they take a lot of amount of fuel, but so do diesel engines. If you're taking Amtrak across the country, those engines aren't necessarily the most efficient either.
Yeah, I guess you're
And
right.
city buses not really that efficient either. It's a weird sort of like catch 22. You can move a lot of things efficiently per ton, but the engines themselves are not necessarily efficient. Okay, if we're talking broad scope, I would say America has to stop being as reliant on cars and maybe think of ways to get to and from your point of work or anywhere as a whole, based on larger scale transit. Cars are really good at doing a lot of things, especially as personal chariots, but they eat your. I'm a car person, and I can tell you firsthand, they take all your money and
Yeah,
they don't give you enough for it.
yeah,
If you can find a way to live without a car on your day-to-day life and have a car for fun on the weekend or adventures, more power to you. That's number one. Number two, I think you said Colorado or Denver. Colorado has a weird sort of like, it's half mountainous terrain that needs some sort of vehicle, especially with winter, you need to get from point A to point B in bad situations that requires a car. I get that and I understand that. And then you've got a lot of big cities: Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, Greeley, and Pueblo. And they're all along the Front Range, and they're all connected by a series of roads, but they're also connected by a series of rails. And one of the more interesting developments is the Front Range Rail Committee idea. The idea that you can commit a big commuter rail system, and you can link Cheyenne to Pueblo, in essence, with commuter trains. This has been gaining a lot of traction for like the last few years, and Amtrak has stepped up and said we'll be a partner if we can get some state funding. And all these communities say, if we can get money into it, it'll be beneficial, because we've witnessed in the last 10 years our explosion of population. And this is only going to get worse and worse as time gets on. And, we need some sort of link. We need some sort of system to get people from point A to point B without having a car. And if we were to connect all these cities that are pretty much in a row with reliable, frequent transportation, I mean, it'll be a game
Right.
changer. Imagine going to see events. Cheyenne has a rodeo, Frontier Days, which is a world class event. You've got Garth Brooks headlining it this year. I mean, imagine if you were in Denver, getting on a train for Cheyenne, Wyoming, getting out of that train and walking to a world class rodeo
Yeah.
to see Garth Brooks sing a concert. There'd be a million people who would love to just do that. Even Union Pacific has done that before.
Oh,
They
okay.
ran steam
Cool.
locomotive specials just for that thing. I mean, you've got a dedicated amount of people who would do it just for that. You've got people who need to get to school. You've got the University of Colorado that has campuses in Colorado Springs, Denver, and Boulder. If you could get a train that connected all those campuses, I mean, imagine saying, I'm going to take this semester in Colorado Springs and get those classes that they only offer down there. It's an amazing resource. Imagine if you had friends in Colorado Springs and you're like, oh, let's go see the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb this year. Oh, don't worry about driving. We'll just take a train. You get off the train, you'll get on a bus, you'll go see the hill climb. Again, another world class event that we only have in Colorado. You can see Bryce Millen race the newest. I think he has
Really?
a Bentley GT. Yeah, it
Huh.
just came out. He's going to be doing a Bentley GT for the biggest, like the best GT time this year. Imagine if you didn't have to drive for that. That's all these amazing things that you could do if we had a reliable, frequent commuter rail system. I work for RTD. RTD is bound by the region. It's a regional transportation district, and it's got 13 or 14 individual districts that put in money to have regular transportation within that district. Now, the problem is, and I'm going to go against RTD for a moment, this doesn't help Colorado as a whole. This only helps the areas in this district. The Department of the CDOT, the Colorado Department of Transportation, they do a busting service, which is an intracity. It's city to city bus transportation, and they started it along the I-25 and the I-70 corridors, and people love it because it goes from city to city where people need to go.
Yeah, I've taken that a couple times. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's a great service.
Yeah.
I've known people who have flown into Colorado Springs Airport because they had a better airline, deal, and they took it back to Denver. I mean, that's if you didn't have to go to DIA, you could price shop around and say, I can take a bus service and save $100 on a flight. It's just going to cost me a couple hours. Why not?
Yeah.
I'll save $100 for a couple hours on a bus. Who cares? But what CDOT really is doing well, and I applaud them for their effort, is that they've organized this statewide idea of, we want to move people from city to city inside the state. And if CDOT got the contract, let's just say, or we're a partner in making this commuter rail a possibility, even if you said CDOT and Amtrak work as a partnership, CDOT runs the stations and Amtrak runs the trains, you've got a great partnership there because then CDOT runs buses all over Colorado. They say, okay, every train station is going to be a bus station. Every bus, flows to a train. And then if you were able to make one sort of all in one pass where you don't have to worry about transfers, if you make this system uh you know everything flows together, it's the stream into river idea that you make little bits that flow into bigger bits. If you make that happen, that's going to be an amazing system. But there's a lot of ifs, there's a lot of what ifs, and nothing is certain. But I have to say Mustang is a great service, and RTD also does good services as well, but RTD is limited by the district that they serve, and CDOT is not. So maybe if they all work together, they can make something great. But collaboration is not always what people think about.
Yeah, I definitely do wish that was more connected because, like, what you were saying about how RTD is a little bit limited, especially like with the buses. I figured out once, years ago. It's probably different now, but years ago when I didn't have a car, it was faster. I should say it was almost faster for me to ride my bicycle than take the bus to certain places. Like if I really, you know, put my ass into gear and pedaled quick, I could beat the bus. But like, if I'm just cruising along, definitely not. So like I could there's definitely room for improvement. But yeah, I mean there are some good signs like what you're saying with the new Amtrak expansion and everything. So I mean, we'll see what the future holds with that. Hopefully something good for public transit because I know you and I are in like a Facebook group that someone was talking about like what how do you go and get like a COVID vaccine if you don't have a car? Like it's like all the infrastructure is set up for a car, especially in the Western US where it's all spread out. So like it's expanding public transit can benefit people in ways that you might not be able to think of, helping people go and go to the doctor if they don't have a car, can help with public health in general, stuff like that. I'm sure I'm forgetting other stuff, but yeah.
I mean, they're all good points. Specifically with the vaccinations, yeah, when you have drive-through vaccination sites that you can't access as a person on a bicycle or on your feet, that's prohibitively biased.
Right.
I got my COVID vaccine at Denver International Airport, and one of the reasons I chose that site is it was accepting transportation workers primarily, and it's at the end of a major rail line. So, getting there was easy enough for me who has a bus pass and the access to do it. But that's again prohibitive. You know, if people in Denver who don't have a car, who don't have a bus pass, can't walk and get vaccinated, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
So,
Well, cool. Well, I guess this went a little longer than I expected it to, but thanks for sticking around and um, answering all my dumb questions. But
oh, I had a great time.
yeah, thanks. Anything you wanted to add before we sign off here?
A couple of things. Number one, I still love hearses, even though I sold my own. And HearseCon is in Denver. So if you don't know about this, there is a convention just for hearse owners and hearse aficionados. So it's called HearseCon. It is the second weekend of June. I think HearseCon 2021. Let me just double check. June 10th through June 13th. and I'm going to be going, so I'll see you there. If you've ever wanted to be like see a lot of interesting and weird cars, you should go to there. There's also a carnival and morbid curiosities. You know, as people who enjoy automobiles, we don't get to the subcultures enough. We go to big meets, and big meets you see a lot of interesting cars, but you don't always see the subcultures. You know, the
Yeah.
VW buses, or the Beatles, or you see the expensive ones that oh, I just got a LaFerrari. Oh, that's amazing, you spent a lot of money. Well, what about the guy who preserved a 1971 Cadillac hearse three-way combination? What do those words mean? That's really cool. That goes on in Denver, and I feel like not enough people know about that. Second thing is, if you want to race in the 24 Hours of Lemons, there's a huge community of help out there. You can always reach out to me. Well, maybe not me, but reach out to organizers. There's a forum on the 24hoursoflemons.com, and just say, hey, I want to get involved. Let me know what's required. It's one of the cheapest way to go endurance racing. Endurance racing is crazy. Take it easy, but it's a lot of fun, and you meet a lot of great people. And don't be afraid to be that one guy who has a lot of weird cars. I know it as a fact of the guy who showed up to work in a hearse, and like everybody knows you, but nobody knows you.
Yeah.
If you've got a car that you're afraid to own because you're going to be like, oh, who's that weird guy? He drives a Lincoln limousine every day to work. Who cares? If that's what you enjoy, do it. If you really like Ford Taurus SHOs like me, enjoy it. Do it. If you like having Toyota MR2s, enjoy it. Do it. You only get this one life to experience cars and life, and maybe Toyota Camrys are your jam, but life's too short to drive boring cars.
Amen. Yeah, I'll
That's
sign
it.
off
That's
to
my
that.
spiel.
Well, cool. Well, thanks again for doing this. Yeah, I think that's about it. I'm gonna stop recording here.
All right. Have a good.
We don't think you fight fire with fire fists, we think you fight fire with water fists. We gonna fight racism, not with racism, but we gonna fight with solidarity. We said we're not gonna fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism.
Amazingly, or not so amazingly, Cuba's crime rate is one of the lowest in the entire hemispheres. Oddly enough, it seems that when people have their basic human needs met, they're less likely to commit crimes.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
The free market mythology, it argues that the most ruthless, selfish, opportunistic, greedy, calculating plunderers, applying the most heartless measures in cold-blooded pursuit of corporate interest and wealth accumulation, will produce the best results for all of us. Through something called the invisible hand.
What are you smiling about?
Dude, I almost had you.